This is going to be what you guys need to know, or an overview of it for Lab 12, specifically the respiratory portion. So we've got a model. Starting off, we've got the perinasal sinuses. So perinasal, you're going to be around the nasal cavity, which is this guy, nasal cavity. This would be your frontal bone. So you've got the frontal sinuses. Back here would be sphenoid. So you're gonna have the sphenoidal sinuses. Here would be your ethmoid bone, but you can't really see the sinuses, but they would be up in the ethmoid bone. There's a lot of little ones there. And then the maxillary bone would be here and then wrapping up, but you can't really see the sinuses on that one either. So just be aware that they're kind of spread out over those bones. Over here is the auditory tube. It comes down from the ear. You guys remember that cut from a couple weeks back. Opens up there. And then down here, you have the top of the mouth. So here's your mouth, tongue. This would be the hard palate. It's the bony part of the roof of your mouth. Then back here, there's some soft tissue. That's going to be the soft palate. And then the thing that hangs down kind of looks like a punching bag in the back of your throat. You see it like swinging back and forth in the cartoons when they scream. That is your uvula. Right. So now we'll do pathway of air into the lungs. And so the first part is just transferring the air to the portion of the lungs where gas exchange is going to take place. So that's the conducting zone. It's going to start here. This is the nostril or external nares, and then come up into the nasal cavity. In the nasal cavity, you have the superior, middle, and inferior nasal concha. Those are going to kind of cause the air to swirl around, come up to your body temperature or closer to it so that gas exchange can occur a little more efficiently. And also the mucus up here is going to help to trap particles, things coming in to prevent them from getting into your lungs. Here would be the internal nares, and then you're going to go into the pharynx. The pharynx has 3 portions named for their area. The nasopharynx is going to be here at the back of the nasal cavity. Oropharynx is going to be towards the back of the mouth. And the laryngopharynx is going to be down here by the larynx. This guy is going to be your larynx, and it'll go into the trachea, which will drop down into the lungs. This guy here is the epiglottis. So when you swallow, this guy can come over and kind of seal this off to prevent food from getting down into the lungs. And then here would be your vocal cords. In addition to vibrating and helping you make sounds, they also help to seal off the lungs. So I think that's it for this model. Go ahead and switch to this guy. So this is going to be your overall, the whole thing is the larynx. It's suspended from the hyoid bone up here. The hyoid bone's kind of at the top of the neck, bottom of the head. So hyoid bone, the large piece of cartilage here is going to be the thyroid cartilage. It's named that because you have the thyroid gland right here. It wraps all the way around. It's just that the right side of this model is not showing those structures. This tip is the laryngeal prominence. And then if we turn this guy around, we have this guy's the cricoid cartilage, which does actually wrap around, but the largest portion is here in the back. Folding down, this is the epiglottis that we saw. It seals off the lungs when you're or I guess specifically it seals off the trachea when you swallow. And then down here are the vocal folds. These would be the vocal folds right here at the top. And then down on the side would be the vestibular folds. And muscles will work these guys to manipulate the tension on those, which will help you to regulate the sounds that you make with your voice, and also to prevent food or water from getting down into the lungs. All right, so we'll switch now to this guy. So this is how air is going to get down into the respiratory part of your lungs. So we've got the thing we just looked at, the larynx here, so tracheal, or thyroid cartilage, sorry. And then the trachea, cricoid cartilage. Trachea comes down and splits into two primary bronchi. The point up here that sticks up on the inside and kind of divides which way the air goes is called the carina. So primary bronchi, don't get too hung up on this. It's really simple. The first time you have the primary, the first time it branches, the second time it branches is the secondary, and then the third time it branches is the tertiary, and then it continues on to quaternary all the way through till it's branched like a dozen or so times. And then ultimately it gets to where gas exchange takes place. So we'll skip this guy. The final ends are going to be the the terminal bronchioles, and that'll be the end of the conducting zone. So here, conducting zone comes in, goes all the way down the trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary, on down till you get to the terminal bronchioles. That's the end of the conducting zone. I'm going to pick up over here. Here's your terminal bronchiole, and then the beginning of the respiratory zone is going to be the respiratory bronchiole. This is the first place where it's still bronchial, but it's the first place where gas exchange is actually taking place. So you have a respiratory bronchiole, and then you have the alveolar duct, which opens up into these little sacs, which are the alveoli. And this is where your gas exchange is going to take place. This whole thing collectively, all the alveoli, the duct, is an alveolar sac. So, alveolar duct, alveoli, alveolar sac. All right, let's come back over to this side. And surrounding the lungs on the outside, there's two layers of pleura. An outer or parietal layer and an inner or visceral layer. And then there's a potential space in between those, which would make up the pleural cavity. The pleural cavity, if you think of it like, I don't know, I'm wearing a flannel shirt right now, so you got a t-shirt and a flannel shirt. There's a potential space between those two layers of clothing, and that's kind of what's going on here. That potential space is the pleural cavity on here. There's a little bit of fluid in there that lubricates it, but yeah, so the lung doesn't sit inside, it's surrounded by the pleural cavity, but it doesn't sit inside of it, if that makes sense. So, also the tip of the lung is going to be the apex, and then the bottom of the lung will be the base. Switch over here. Here we go. So, another model got the trachea here going down, then it's going to split and go into the lung. This area surrounding where it splits, where it opens up and kind of tapers in to funnel in the blood vessels and bronchioles, is going to be the pulmonary hilus. Anywhere where you have an organ or a structure that tapers in like that to allow something else, that area will be called a hilus. So we'll see that again on some other stuff later on. Yeah, pulmonary hilus here. On the left lung, you have this cardiac notch because your heart will sit right here. And then the left lung will only have two lobes, an upper lobe and a lower lobe. And then those are divided by an oblique fissure here. On the right side, there we go. Got three lobes, upper, middle, and lower. You're gonna have an oblique fissure, the same as the other side, but also a horizontal fissure. And up here would be the apex, bottom's the base, and I think that's about it for this guy. All right, we're gonna take one more look at a full-size person. So here you got the liver, and then this guy will be your diaphragm. So you see the muscle fibers run this way. So when the diaphragm contracts, it's going to kind of compress here, enlarging the thoracic cavity, and that's going to pull the lungs, causing them to bring air inside. And then when it relaxes, it'll come back up to this position and push that air out of the lungs. If we work backwards here, where this area, this textured area, would be the respiratory zone, and then these guys would pick up with the terminary bronchioles for the conducting zone. So terminal bronchioles are going to come up. As they come together, then you'll end up with your tertiary, then secondary, then primary bronchioles back to the trachea. Stick the lungs on here real quick. So the right side, this bottom up against the diaphragm, is going to be the base. And then we're going to have the lower, middle, and upper lobes with your oblique fissure and horizontal fissure. On this side, your heart is going to fit in here like that. And then the left lung is going to go here like that. So this is going to be the lower lobe of the left lung, and then this guy will be the upper lobe of the left lung. If I can get it back together. You guys might be there for a while. There we go. Okay. So now that we got it back together, you can see you've got the oblique fissure and the cardiac notch. And then come up, you'll have the actual apex of the lung, the peak, which sits up. If you see the collarbone is here, you see how high that actually sits up. It's a lot higher than you might have thought. See if we can't get this on. And then we'll take this plate, go back together here, and come back with the head. So from here, you can see the trachea coming up here to the thyroid cartilage. You have your laryngeal prominence, and that's going to go up, get your hyoid bone on up into the head. And that's about it for the respiratory portion of Lab 12.